Luke, are you excited for the 2021 Oscars?
Oh boy, am I, especially as it's going to be in April.
Yeah, wow. Oh, I actually didn't know that. That's so mental. Do you know who else is excited, of course? Netflix. Because Netflix could break an 85-year record at the Oscars in 2021 by having more Best Picture nominations than any other studio in history, by breaking a record that was last set by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, which scored 5 nods at the 9th Academy Awards in 1937. So Netflix are looking like maybe, obviously it's all speculation, but the Academy is very predictable, maybe we'll get more than 5 Academy Award nominations in the forthcoming Oscars. Does that sound exciting?
That is exciting, Michael, and I can already picture it. You know, the stars are walking down the red carpet in April 2021 in Hollywood, and the stars of Cuties are the first to cross the red carpet. Of course, that movie got a lot of hype because of Netflix, and then they are quickly followed by the stars of 365 Days.
Yes, exactly.
Shortly after, another movie which I'm sure is one on the list that is going to be nominated for Best Picture. So yeah, Netflix have had a fantastic year, and for me anyway, it's those 2 movies and this one we're about to review which have really won it for them.
Yeah, Netflix is also hoping to do well in the new Oscars category, shitty Family Guy knockoffs made for a fraction of the budget that are only enjoyed by people with no taste at all. Hello and welcome to Select and Reflect, the movie review podcast. We look at films that have come out in the near and distant past. We give them a couple of watches and evaluate them beyond first impressions. I'm your host, Michael, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Luke. And this week, we are celebrating the 0-year anniversary of the Hillbilly Elegy. Of course, because it was released, this week. Is that not right, Luke?
It is right. It was released this week on Netflix.
So why don't you tell us a thing or two about the Hillbilly Elegy then?
Sure thing, Michael. So The Hillbilly Elegy is a 2020 American drama film directed by Ron Howard from a screenplay by Vanessa Taylor, based on the 2016 memoir of the same name by J.D. Vance. Yes, so like we said, this movie it's based on a book that came out in 2016, and the movie has come out this year. It stars Amy Adams, Glenn Close, Gabrielle Basso, Haley Bennett, Frida Pinto, and Bo Hopkins, with Owen, this is a Greek name, as Zatalos. I think I got that. Yeah, I imagine he's the little kid who plays J.D. Vance. So the movie was released on November the 11th, 2020, but of course wasn't released actually on Netflix until I think the 23rd of November, so about 12 days after. And Michael, can you tell me the budget for Hillbilly Elegy?
I don't know. This film feels like it was made with some degree of confidence that it would be worth investing some amount of money in. So I'm going to go for what feels like modest and say $8 million.
Times that by 5.
$40 million.
And then add 5.
$45 million.
There you got it. $45 million for this movie. Yeah, that is the budget. I imagine just to pay people like Glenn Close and Amy Adams. And Michael, can you tell me what... oh no, you can't tell me because
I was going to say, this will be complicated.
We don't have a box office. Sorry, that was just muscle memory there. Actually, it was released on Netflix on November the 24th. I apologise. But anyway, Michael...
liar.
Yes. This is a Netflix movie. We have reviewed 2 previous Netflix movies this year, 365 Days, and also that other movie, Cuties, both Hall of Famers, in my opinion. So what about Hillbilly Elegy? Did you like this movie?
I spent a lot of my time watching this trying to think about why exactly I didn't like it. So no, I didn't like it.
Are you glad I decided to make us watch this?
Yeah, it presents itself as a film which you're kind of like, I feel like I should be liking this. When you're watching the film, it's kind of like, it does a very good job at imitating a film where you'd think you'd be like, oh yeah, I like this film. But there's just not enough there. And yeah, I mean, overall, I would say, I don't know how glad I am, Luke, because I do think there is some interesting stuff to talk about regarding this film, which we will get into. I will say the experience of watching this film, though, is not particularly entertaining. I didn't find this film great in the way that
so you're not glad.
365 days, and to be honest, I mean, this is going to get taken out of context, but even I don't know if I can say it, Luke. I mean, I feel like it's going to be terrible. People are going to take this the wrong way, but I'm just saying even Cuties had some more entertaining elements.
Oh, yes, I can think of those elements right now.
There we go. But no, yeah, did you like it, Luke?
Yeah, I did. I love this. Now, this is... Look, I asked you to watch this, and you have made it clear that you're not glad that I made you watch it. But here's the thing. I normally kind of enjoy bad movies, but this one I just absolutely hated. And I was halfway through, and I was just thinking, oh, why did I put myself through this? Because I was the one who chose this movie, and I was thinking, I don't know. But here's the issue with this.
Yeah, much like poor people, you chose your own misfortune.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. There's a part of it which is quite insidious. The message quite bad, and then there's another part of it which is, God, this movie is it's so boring. It is so boring and pointless and awful, and I really hate it for those two reasons.
Yeah, I think the thing is, I'm very used to saying, like, after a film being like, what was the point of that? I feel like I've said that before about one of the films we reviewed.
Yeah.
But in this case, I feel like I can't say that, because the films where I said what was the point of that had more of a point than this film. I mean, apart from, like, obviously there's the objectionable points, which we'll get into, but from a narrative perspective, it's kind of like, what was the point of this film?
Yeah.
Like, it's genuinely, it's one of those films where you clock that you're like an hour into it, and you're like, oh, I'm halfway. And you're like, why do I have no idea what this film is even about and where this film is going?
It's because the protagonist is fucking shit. That's why.
I know, yeah. It's like so boring.
But that's the thing. There is, like I said, kind of an insidious underbelly to this film. And we can go into that more, particularly when talking about the book this film is based on. But just not the underbelly. I guess the top belly, whatever it is just really bland and boring. So it doesn't even suck you in, really. It's just, yeah, I can't imagine anyone watching this movie and thinking that they had a good time. I really can't. But anyway, Michael, well, actually, there were some people who did, apparently.
I don't know, yeah. I mean, it's kind of interesting because I can understand, like, when I was watching this, I was thinking, I can maybe understand people liking the book. I could also understand a lot more people, perhaps people more like me and you, really not liking the book even more so. But I feel like at least with the book, you could kind of imagine there'd be some more introspection. It would probably be like, like, I remember when I went to see, I know that's not how they talk, but I remember when I went to see my mom and she was dying from heroin, and it was like, there'd probably be some, you'd probably get sucked into it more with a book. I can imagine as a book, you'd be like, oh, this is interesting. But as a film, probably, it's just not up to par.
I mean, yeah. I'll say that, yeah, probably the book is more, again, I'm going to use that word again, sinister. Because the guy who wrote it, J.D. Vance, yes, definitely, he has other agendas on his mind.
Bad hombre.
Yeah, he's a bad hombre. Yeah. But I can imagine the book is also probably more entertaining as well. Choose your poison, I guess, in terms of the book or the film. But anyway, we shall actually get into the film now. So, like we said before, the movie is based on a guy called J.D. Vance, who is a Yale law student. Of
JD Sports.
Yeah, great. Who must return to his poor family in Ohio after a family emergency. So, yeah, his mum put some heroin into her system because she is an addict and she ODs. She puts too much in. And, then she, of course, almost dies. Much like how if you put too much welfare into the economic system, it's not good for everyday Americans. The economies die. Would you say that's a good comparison, Michael?
Yes, I would. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And I would say, but I suppose the difference is that while the various corporations bravely manufactured the heroin crisis, and the opioid crisis in general, they did not manufacture the welfare crisis. They tried to protect us from that, which is good because that was the real crisis.
Yes. So first we need to do nitpicks. We haven't done that yet. How many do you have?
I only have... I've got 2, actually. I was about to say I only have 1. I've got 2. It's just, the film was so boring that I forgot that I had 2.
I've got 4, so you go first.
Okay. Yeah, so the first one's actually a nitpick on me, which is weird because obviously this film is so what it is that, maybe I shouldn't be nitpicking myself, but maybe I should go easy on myself because I had to watch this film. But I actually didn't know what an elegy was, and I still don't. So I wanted to take this opportunity to ask you and to expose the fact that maybe I'm not the authority on all things. Like, I know what a eulogy is. And, when you first said, I'm not going to lie, Luke, but you have been known in the past to mispronounce a few things in our various conversations. And for a minute, when you said the Hillbilly Elegy, and you told me we were watching this film, I thought you'd just kind of misspoken when you meant to say Hillbilly Eulogy. So I looked up, Hillbilly Eulogy, and I was like, oh, Hillbilly Elegy. And I was like, what the hell's an elegy? So, Luke, what's an elegy?
Michael, I actually looked this up as well.
Okay, yeah.
And I thought it was, I guess, like a nice tale, a romantic tale. And on Wikipedia, I remember from Wikipedia, it was like, it specifically, it's about a poem, apparently. A poem with reflection, I think. So, yeah, I kind of got it right, like a grand tale, but of course this is in a poem. Yeah. The original,
like a bard. Although,
Yeah,
what a bard would tell.
Yeah, the
a
book.
bard's a person.
Yeah, the book isn't a poem either, so it's kind of...
it's kind of a lie, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of a lie, like a lot
Although
of things.
anything can be a poem nowadays because you don't have to rhyme in poetry anymore. It's the participation trophy of poetry.
Yeah,
so
but
like anything
he's
can
not,
be a poem.
He's not saying it is a poem.
He's
that's
not,
the difference. He's not identifying the book as a poem.
Yeah. The only thing poetic is that I was vomiting in stanzas.
Okay, give me your two nitpicks.
I gave you the first one was the nitpick on me not knowing what an elegy was, but the second one is the ridiculousness. And maybe you're going to say this wasn't ridiculous, but I thought the police response times, or the police response time we see when his mom's trying to attack him, and then they call, and then he gets dragged out, and this all plays out in one kind of shot, and then the police are already there.
If I know anything about America, it's that they have far too many police officers.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I was also thinking, my other nitpick is that the woman called the police even though she had dogs in her house. Let me tell you, okay, if you live in America, you do not call the police when you have dogs in your house unless the dogs are pissing all over your carpets and you want to get them shot.
Wow.
Yeah, okay. I'd be like, I don't want to call the police. Are you crazy? I've got dogs. They might get shot.
Yeah, okay, so we'll get into my nitpicks now. So my first nitpick is apparently the term redneck is offensive. Like, are you serious, man? The term redneck, just complete rubbish, garbage, as they'd say in America, complete garbage.
Yeah, I also like how just like a typical PC liberal SJW, he gets offended by the term redneck, even though he admits the term doesn't apply to him. Yes. Just like how PC SJW people, even when they're white, will get offended if you say the N-word. It's so typical.
Just like that. Yeah, no, don't tell me that conservatives, even though they deride identity politics, like to play it just as much as they can. Don't tell me that's the case. Oh, God. But yeah, that was, but it's not even identity politics. It's like redneck. That is, why people are called rednecks, Michael?
Yeah, because they get bitten on their necks by like insects and stuff when they're out in the fields. Yeah. So they need to scratch it.
Yeah, it's not, I don't consider that offensive.
It shows that they've got really tasty blood.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't think anyone else does either. In that area, that is something completely new that I'd never ever heard of. So my next nitpick is so Amy Adams praises her son because he lists who was the quarterback? Montana.
I'm not going to know this. Oh yeah.
What's his first name? Montana. Tony Montana. That's from
Hannah.
Sorry.
Hannah Montana.
Great.
No. Tony Montana. He's from what's he from? He's like a gangster.
Tony Montana. Yeah, he's from Scarface.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
he's yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's Joe Montana. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, Joe Montana. Yes. The comeback kid. He won 4 Super Bowls. I know that. Perfect 4-0 record in Super Bowls. And it is really weird. Why are you obsessing over him after he's retired? Especially as they had a new quarterback come in. For the San Francisco 49ers, who I can't remember, but his last name is Smith, who also was in the 90s. My nitpick is just, why the hell does Amy Adams think he's smart for listing football stats? Like, why? Well, that doesn't mean you're smart. That just means you're, I don't know.
A jock.
A nerd. I would say a nerd, really.
Nerds like football.
Yeah, the jock would not. Said. No, it's not a question of liking football. The jock would not remember the stats. And it doesn't make you smart either. I could list off so many Lewis Hamilton stats, your head would just be blown. But does that make me smart? No, it doesn't. It definitely doesn't. But Formula 1 is a smarter sport than football, so maybe no. But there's also another kind of nitpick in this. So the store guy, the guy he's working at the store. Obviously, Amy Adams and JD Vance knocked down I don't know what they knocked down specifically, but they knock something down, cards spill out all over the floor, and then he says to them, pick it up, and they start picking it up, and then Amy Adams is like, all right, I'm picking it up, and then
he's like, get out of here.
Just 2 seconds later, he's like, nah, get out of here. It's like, wait, they were doing what you were saying, now you're just going to have to clean this mess up. Well, what the fuck is this? Just appalling, screenwriting or I don't know, maybe editing or stuff from the director. I don't know, just an appalling like way to construct a scene there. But yeah, so that's that. And next up, his girlfriend, Michael, his girlfriend. I love this. So his girlfriend is Usha, an Indian American woman who was a law clerk to the Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts and clerked for Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Yes, one of the. Well, I mean, I don't like John Roberts either, but Brett Kavanaugh, given his past, is probably one of the worst people in American politics. Not just because of his past as well, combined with his political or judicial opinions. Sorry, they're definitely not political; they're judicial opinions. The nitpick. I don't know if it's a nitpick. Maybe it's a litpick. I paused. So she's having a call with JD Vance. And I'm just going to call him JD from now on. She's having a call with JD, and JD shouting, my mum's on heroin. You don't know what it's like. You don't try to, get involved in these problems. You can't hack it. So then the phone call ends, and she goes back to sit down at her desk in this, nice, comfy office, and at the table rather. And I paused on when she sits down because it has a shot of what she's working on, like her paper that she's working on. And
okay,
do you know what it says, Michael?
No, I'm looking forward to this.
Hillary Clinton Libya report.
Oh wow!
And I mean, what year is this set in, Michael?
20. Well, actually, I don't really remember what year this is set in, to be honest.
Because you're dumb.
I mean, I feel like it's set in 2011. Is that right?
You are correct. There you go.
Hey,
2011. Just have a bit more confidence.
What
happened in 2011?
Benghazi.
Ben fucking Ghazi. Benghazi. The bringing, and that's the thing. I just love it. Like just these people that that have such normal lives. They're just trying to make it. This law student and his girlfriend. They're just trying to start a family. Live the American dream, and yet they're engaged in the most like bullshit stuff. I mean, of course, I don't like Hillary Clinton, but the Benghazi stuff, as everyone should know, is
Hillary
bullshit,
rotten.
Yes. And yeah, it's just hilarious to have that contrast. Like, she goes into this room. I assume it's Benghazi, by the way. I assume it is. She has this talk about, damn, I hope your mother's doing well. Humanizing stuff, and going into this room with the most evil people, concocting the most evil schemes imaginable. It's great. Love the contrast. But yeah, next nitpick is also due to his girlfriend. Apparently, JD Vance, when he says syrup, his girlfriend can't tell that he means syrup. He goes like syrup. I mean...
Yeah, although to be fair, one time I heard an American say crayons instead of crayons, and I had no idea what they were saying.
Well, that's a bit different, though.
Yeah, that is different.
I immediately could tell he meant syrup.
Especially seeing as one they like making pancakes.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's pretty always like, what the hell syrup that you want in your... Like, in fact, actually, I remember one time I was watching our favourite YouTube channel, Cowboy Kent Rowlands, who does cooking, and he was making his Mexican fried rice, and he said, one of the things you're going to want to use is some corn oil. And for a minute, I had like a slight second of corn oil, and I was like, oh, corn oil. Like, obviously, I can tell from the context that's what it means. Like, I wouldn't personally pronounce it corn oil, but, I can respect that that's how some people might think that word should be pronounced,
Yeah.
Not difficult.
No, definitely not. Just ridiculous all around. But yeah, so that is, I guess, the nitpicks. We'll get into the plot. We've already talked about the plot. This guy needs to go back home because his mother has a heroin OD, and basically, the plot. Let's talk about the plot structure because it's really weird. Like, it cuts randomly to flashbacks at this point when JD was a kid, when he was like 11 years old. And he's going about his childhood, and then it cuts randomly then back to modern day, and it takes place 2011, and it takes place within the course of about 24 hours on that day. So what do you think about the structure, Michael? Yeah,
it really kind of surprised me at first because obviously you start off with him as a kid, and it's sort of like he then goes to Yale, and at first I was like, oh, they really skipped over him going to Yale because I was like, he basically there's a scene of him being like, oh yeah, going to Yale, it's really hard, and then obviously the next scene he's in Yale, and I was like, okay, they really skip past that, and they still kind of skip past it, but then obviously I was kind of expecting, I was like, oh, so this is going to be a film that operates at a relatively fast pace, it's going to kind of, obviously it can't go that fast because this guy is pretty young, but it's going to kind of blast through a lot of his life to try and get to the interesting bit. It doesn't get to the interesting bit. No, and then basically you realize, I don't remember when it first happens, but yeah, it cuts back to him as a kid, and you're like, oh, it's going to be one of those parallel timeline stories, which, I think they do exist. I admit right now I can't think of a single example of it, but I'm pretty sure there are biopics that do have that sort of parallel line format of one part showing him in the future, another part showing him in the past, and it's kind of like you see the interaction between the two things. So it is something which can be done and can be interesting, but in the case of this film, it only served to make the whole thing feel less directed and less focused, because, as you sort of already said, there's no real logic to when you flash back between the different timelines and stuff.
No, absolutely, there isn't, and there's no narrative thrust in this movie either. That's what I'd say. It just seems, we talked about there's no real point to the movie, and we'll talk about, maybe there is a point at the end, but just the actual content, it's just, you just wonder what this all is about, and I guess the tension is, well, basically, it's a guy from a poor background who wants to try and make it in America. He comes from poverty, wants to try and be a success, and he has issues. Who would have thought, hey? I mean, God, what an original tale. And I guess it works politically because, it's an inspiring story. But liberals kind of love that thing, and for the conservatives, they love it since, he did it because of hard work. And we'll get onto that and the politics of it, but that's a key part of the reason why the movie exists. But yeah, just overall on, the story, it's same old cliches about him not fitting in on the East Coast compared to rural Ohio.
It's a bit like Legally Blonde.
Yeah, exactly. When he goes to that dinner and he doesn't know the forks, just
that's like the
biggest
laziest
cliche ever.
Yeah, like the laziest way of communicating a class divide. Like, oh well, look at all the forks. Like that's just. I mean, I know it probably is a relatively common experience. I mean, I don't know how the forks work, although I was kind of vaguely aware of the work your way in thing, but. So maybe it's common enough that justifies it being used all the time, but it does feel like that's basically, how do we show that this person isn't posh or, upper class, and he's in over his head in that regard. It's like, oh, well, posh people like using loads of forks, so we'll just throw that in there. It's very, it's a very common trope.
I don't know. I just ask, really. That's me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just ask, like, which fork do we use? Just tell me the basics, and I'd be like, oh, thank you. I make them, and I'd make that person feel good. For, helping me. So
yeah, that's true.
That works.
Yeah, but hold on a minute, Luke. If you need help, then you're a failure. Okay,
that's a good point,
you shouldn't need help. You should pick yourself. You should just pick the right way of operating your forks up by your bootstrap.
Okay, so yeah, this movie basically what it does is it follows this kid throughout his life, and you really didn't get that from the trailer. I don't know if you've seen the trailer.
No, actually, I could have watched it, but
panned on social media when it came out because it's like, oh, this is just your typical hillbilly stuff where Hollywood tries to, you got Amy Adams doing these weird accents and Glenn Close, and it's like, oh, this is just pathetic. Another, we want to understand this culture, and then just completely, I guess using stereotypes to understand it, that kind of thing. But that's the thing. That's what I thought coming into it. But then J.D. Vance, he wasn't really in the trailer. He's the main character, and here you follow him, and he is incredibly unlikable. I mean, he is just so unlikable. I mean, there's this point in the movie when he's talking to his grandma, and he says, "Oh, I want to watch the Meet the Press Monica Lewinsky special," and I'm like, "Oh my fucking God!" Like that just made me hate him so much. And as someone who's into politics, obviously, I'd be like, "Oh, why would you want to watch that?" Or maybe it's because he's a conservative. I don't know, but it's like, God, the most. Like inane shit. I don't know, but I looking back on that, I'm just like, oh God, what a fat tubby little nerd you are. And yes, I am fat shaming. You can deal with it, Michael. He deserves to be fat shamed. You think of all the pain that he has gone through in his life, but he's still the most unsympathetic character. It's just incredible, really. There's the scene where he asks his grandma if she's going to die, and she's like, I don't know, maybe. But then he leaves because he's angry because she won't tell him. I just found that so weird, and it's like he's so entitled. His grandma's like, I don't know if I'm going to die, and he just storms off like, well, you should be able to tell me.
You better know.
Yeah,
you're gonna know soon.
God, he is so unlikable, and just why are we rooting for him? Why? It's because he's poor. I want to root for the sister. She seems nicer. I don't want to root for this guy. I just don't like him at all. What do you think?
No, yeah. I mean, he isn't likable. I wasn't overburdened by his unlikableness. Actually, I did see somebody, I saw somebody compare this film to in the Simpsons episode where they have the film festival and Mr. Burns makes the film about himself, A Star is Burns, or whatever it was called. Do you remember that with Jay Sherman? And then everyone's like, boo. And like,
yeah, no, I do.
Boo words.
That is this. You're making yourself the main character, because of course the main character is the person who wrote this book. You're making yourself the main character. Yeah, and
it's all about what a hero you are.
What a hero you are. But the thing is, like, you do nothing heroic.
I know, yeah.
You're just like a run-of-the-mill kid who, like I said, is a bit of a nerd, a bit fat, okay, whatever. But like the scene with his grandmother is just... And then he doesn't even help his mum either when she wants him to piss for him, like, to keep his job. And I'm like, okay, we'll get onto this. It's a political thing as well, that scene. But just this guy is so unlikable. And that's the thing. That J.D. Vance wrote this character because, he's probably thinking... I mean... I don't know how much the book changed from the movie because I haven't read the book. But he's probably thinking, well, he's writing this down. It's like, oh, people will sympathise with me. Of course they will, because all my actions were the correct actions, obviously. And I'm like, well, I don't. I definitely don't think all your actions were correct. And yeah, you don't seem that likable, to be honest.
Yeah, so, I would say at best he's just like neutral in a boring way. Like I was thinking about how recently, I say recently actually, a year or so ago, a YouTuber I quite like, but I'm not going to shout them out. Fine, I will. David Wood, for anyone who wants to know. They're from Kentucky, and actually it's quite interesting. They're from Kentucky, and they have a PhD in philosophy. So they actually come from kind of rural hillbilly Kentucky. No, sorry, West Virginia, and even worse. Am I right? And basically he now has a doctorate in philosophy, which whatever. I like him for his philosophical stuff, but basically he uploaded a video about a year or so ago about how his brother had overdosed from I think it was heroin, and basically he was talking about how a lot of his family back from where he comes from has been negatively affected by opioids and things like that. And I thought, basically that's a far more interesting story to me. And I was just thinking, like, but the thing is, it's not even like it's an interesting story because, oh wow, what a great tale. It's really just an interesting story because, to be honest, it's kind of like, I hate to say it, but when I look at rural hillbilly America, I think like none of this stuff feels that like, I'm not saying that this wouldn't be unfortunate, but to be honest, it's all kind of blasé as far as rural America is concerned. Like, I'm sure lots of people struggle with individuals having drug problems in their family. I mean, you don't even have to just look at hillbilly America. Like, even in the UK or whatever, suffering with substance abuse is a pretty common problem. So even from that perspective, it's not like this is some insurmountable thing like, oh man, how did this guy ever deal with that? It's just like, okay, yeah, he had this problem, a problem which lots of people have had, and then he existed. That's pretty much the substance of what this film has going for it. Just like, yeah, this guy, he existed. And yeah, like there's nothing else there apart from, like you say, if there is any kind of judgment you can draw, they're not really positive judgments.
It's at best, it's neutral. Common trait with conservatives: overrating their own brilliance, overrating their own excellence, overrating themselves. Like, oh, of course people will want to know my story, and it's just a really boring story. But that's the case, and it's a boring. Of course, people will sympathise with my character, of course, because I do. No, I mean I don't. Like I said. Well, I guess let's get on to the point of the movie, really, because, well, this is what it says on Wikipedia. The film is a modern exploration of the American dream through 3 generations of the Vances, an Appalachian family. That's what it says, and it's kind of an exploration of the American dream. I mean, there's some stuff which you can glom onto to say that.
Somebody mentions the American dream explicitly. That was great. At the dinner party, it's like I come from a hillbilly family, and so I was like, the American dream. It actually does say that as like a sentence on its own.
Yeah,
which is great.
The thing is, it can maybe the movie is saying, hey, things can go one of 2 ways if you're smart, because apparently Amy Adams is also smart, so is JD, and if you think about their grandparents, they moved to Ohio from Kentucky. But I don't really know why they started off in Kentucky. Maybe it was just to make it more hillbilly-ish. To give it that authentic hillbilly-ish, because maybe Ohio isn't like that. I'm not really sure. But anyway, they go to Ohio to work in the factories. Oh, the factory shut down. I wonder how that happened, eh? But yeah, then Amy Adams, she's really smart. Oh, she doesn't make it. She has a lot of the same problems that people in rural America do too. And then we have J.D. Vance, who finally does make it. So there you go. The American dream eventually arrives if you keep looking at it, maybe. That's maybe the message, but if you keep working for it as well, that's pretty key. That's maybe one point of the movie, but again, it's very thin. I don't know. You can definitely say that.
It was funny because when I was watching this film, I was thinking if there's any message here, it's really that like it's luck. Like it really is luck because this has kind of always been my thoughts on it. I don't deny that there is a.
Well, that's not what this movie is saying. I would think.
Yeah. But it's kind of it's not what the movie's saying, but it's kind of what I was thinking about when I was watching this film because I was thinking to myself
to
like,
point of the movie.
Yeah. No, but this is the thing is I was watching a scene where obviously he gets arrested for smashing up the. I think he gets arrested. The guy says like
he doesn't actually get arrested, does he?
Oh, okay. The reason why I'm thinking it is because the mum says if it was up to me, I'd leave you there, and I wasn't sure what leave you there could possibly refer to because he's obviously being driven back from somewhere and said I'll leave you there, and I'm thinking like so I was assuming it must be like leave you at
probably.
the police station, but that's all I could think. Anyway, I was thinking about that and I was thinking like the reality is, you know, sure, maybe let's grant for a minute that in America if the point might be of the film like, oh, if you work really hard then you can succeed. And you know, if you're somebody who sat there in your parents' trailer or whatever, you don't feel very wealthy at all or anything like that, but if you work really hard, you can succeed. The problem is this film kind of doesn't really cohere with that because he, you know, commits criminal acts and things like that, literally the opposite to what should be considered virtuous, you know, going out and committing acts of criminal vandalism. And you think, so really the message there is, at that point you have to think, well, it can't be if you work really hard and fully commit yourself to doing the right thing, then you will ultimately succeed. You will manifest that destiny. I don't know, but basically it can't be that because this guy, sure, he...
Are you saying it can't be that because he got lucky because he could have had his life ruined?
Yeah, basically that's it. Yeah. Like he got, like you think about all the other people out there who would have, if you took some of the worst moments in this guy's life and applied them to someone else's life, yeah, they would be completely, they would end any chance of succeeding.
The solution to that, let's just ignore it. Let's just ignore the fact that he could have fucked his life up. Let's just ignore that. I mean, there's no talk about him getting lucky or whatever. So we'll just ignore that and move on. And
it's a good idea.
Here's the thing I got from the actual. Well, so we're gonna, I guess, now go on to the actual point, really, and what I think was the actual point. And I don't know if this movie outright states it, but it kind of implicitly states it, maybe unintentionally. It's that. Basically, so JD Vance, you know, he's having this dinner, he's about to make it, you know, join this law firm, and he gets dragged back to Hillbilly land, which prevents him from doing that stuff, you know, going to the interviews, having a good dinner and all that. And essentially what this movie is saying, hey, maybe you leave behind your family, maybe you have to leave behind them to succeed in life. And you think about what happens at the end of the movie, he just leaves his mum in that hotel room all alone. And I don't think he knows that his sister is just outside. So she just happens to be outside, which is good. But he says to her, "Hey, I'm going to leave you until my sister gets here." And so that's pretty, it's pretty bad behavior, I'd say, considering, you know, she just tries to shoot up with heroin. But whatever. And that's what I think. Really, the movie is perhaps about escaping this life to achieve your dreams. You know, and that's the thing. It's not really. Considering the problems that are going on in its home, it's not the best message, really, if you think about it. And I would say that the stakes are not that high either. I mean, what he does is he leaves his mum, or he's going to leave his mum, to do this interview with the best, you know, it's the best law firm in DC, apparently. Why can't you go to the second best? Surely that'll be fine. And that's the thing, it's not an interesting story, and it's why the plot is so bad, you know, it's really boring. And the lack of stakes mean that the message is just so callous. Like, it seems that J.D. Vance wrote this book as a justification for abandoning his family. Like, here's why I had to go to that interview and just leave my mom and just, you know, abandon her. Basically, I had to do that because look at her. Look at what a mess she is. Look at what a mess this whole town is that I come from. So I had to do it, but I didn't have a choice really if I wanted to succeed, and you know that's, you know, the political connotations of that, you know, are quite bad, which we'll dive into as well. But yeah, I mean, it seems to me he thinks in a quite self-serving way, really, the character, and you know, that's why I don't think implicitly. I think this implicitly is the message, because I don't think you would write yourself as a guy who is self-serving, who's callous. But that's what it does come off as. But I think it's kind of inevitable he comes off as that, considering that he's writing himself, and he is probably self-serving and callous. And there's this point it's right at the end of the movie when he walks in to that, to the interview, sit down with the guy, and he said, I'm proud of my family. I'm proud of my family. They're not perfect, but who is, and all that. And he says this line about how basically his family is with him, or his success is his family's success. And again, I think that's just kind of just him trying to justify, like, I did this, I abandoned my family, and it was the right thing to do because now my success is their success, like kind of justifying that in his mind. But really, the message is kind of family matters as far as you can use them, really. And I think his selfishness at the end is really coming through. And again, I don't think that's really the point the movie was going for, or even the point that J.D. Vance was going for. But implicitly, that is, I guess, the message. What do you think, Michael?
No, yeah, I think it's funny because of course the character literally comes out and says like family is the most important thing. So the film definitely gives lip service to the idea that valuing your family and taking care of your family is a good thing to do. But yeah, like if the film does have a message, it's basically that you need to, if you want to succeed, you can't be carrying other people's baggage, which is a message. I will say this. I think the message is realistic. I don't think that, I guess the message, if you're going to not moralize success and simply say what is the way to succeed, the answer to that question is don't be carrying other people's baggage. You say what's wrong with going into the second best law firm? Well, I tell you what, Luke, if you succeed, you got to succeed. If you go to the second best, you're not a success. So the successful thing to do is you've got to not put anyone else's baggage first and just look after number one. Like that's the message. Yeah, of the
if this
film.
was his only chance, by the way, to get into like a great law firm, I'd be kind of okay with this because, like, right, this, if I get a lot of money, I can help my mum, I can help my life or whatever. But he's already set up. He's already at Yale. He's already succeeded in his life, and yet he's going to be a success, no doubt about it. He's going to make it, and yet he's still kind of wants to toss his.
Yeah, actually, that's a really weird thing that I never thought about this film. Like, really, the story of this film should be like how a hillbilly guy came on to be a success. But really, the story there is not about, like, the story there shouldn't be about him getting that job that you mentioned. It should be about him getting to Yale. Like, that's kind of the weird thing about this story. It's sort of like once he's got into Yale, like you say, that's kind of it. Like, basically, it's not as if like oh man, I got into Yale, but I'm a hillbilly, so where am I going to succeed from here? No, once you've got into Yale, you're, I'm not going to say everything's perfectly fine for you, because of course there can be issues with, people being disappointed with the results of having gone to university. It doesn't automatically open doors like it used to back in the day, where you just like, oh, you got a degree, well, welcome aboard, mister. Now there's like other things, but definitely, I think, the question of social mobility in America is not how does the poor working class kid from a rural part of Kentucky succeed after he's been to Yale. That's not the question. The question is, how does a poor working class kid who lives in Kentucky get to Yale? And yet the film kind of brushes over that, which of course makes it extra weird that is the stuff that's used to justify. The film could have been a bit more poignant if it would have been like, in order to get into Yale, in order to have that success, he needed to abandon his family, and you could still kind of criticize him from a moral direction, but at least from a story perspective, you could be like, wow, that was a really poignant moment where he had to give up his family in order to succeed. But yeah, like you say, he's kind of already succeeded.
Yeah, no, I mean, you think about it, there is no stakes really to this movie, and there's no stakes, yet he is still this callous, and that does show how selfish he is, and therefore the message in this movie, because this J.D. Vance guy is the good protagonist, the message is you should kind of abandon your family. That's necessary then. I guess it's necessary to succeed. And yeah, not in a kind of like moral conundrum way. No, you should kind of just, you use your family as much as you can, but know that your success, that is the most important thing. And you're right, there is lip service paid to like, oh, family matters. Family is the most important thing in this world. But yeah, he does literally. I mean, he has to be convinced to come to fucking Ohio, doesn't he? He still goes back and has dinner. I guess I know his mum was a bit awful to him when he was a kid, obviously, but like still, that's your mum. I imagine if she could have died, I don't know, man. I just think that's again, your character isn't the most sympathetic anyway, and then you consider his actions, particularly at the end of the movie again when he leaves his mum in the motel. Like, just not the best character. But again, like if you're a JD Vance, a conservative writing this book, then hey, well, what you can't help it. I guess you're so blind by your perceived greatness or what you think of yourself, then you don't consider how maybe these actions that you did maybe weren't the best thing. But there you go. Shall we get into the politics, Michael?
Yes, absolutely.
So we said really that there's not really points to the movie, and if it is, it's a bad point, which is kind of implicit and not intentional, perhaps. But there is certainly a political point, even if it's kind of muted compared to the book. And the political point is, what an inspiring story, and that really, like I said before, it makes liberals and conservatives happy, but it really doesn't focus on why things are the way they are. I mean, that's the thing. Like this, there is a political ideology in this movie, even though it doesn't seem like that. And this political ideology seeks to kind of depoliticize the elements that make things hard in J.D. Vance's life. It's just, these are the facts of life. And you think about, all the boarded up shops, all the factories closed. He says at the start, yes, there's no hope in Middletown. Gee, I wonder how that happened. I mean, he's right at the start of the movie again complaining about student money. He can't afford $21,000. He has to work.
That one's like so funny.
3 jobs. I mean, again, I wonder how that happened. I mean, you just look at the poverty, that go in his hometown, the weird hours that his sister has to work for her job, having to look after the children and all that. And then we have, of course, we are introduced to the wonderful American healthcare system. And Amy Adams having to put herself through nursing school as a single mother. Then you have the grandmother, having to get Meals on Wheels and having to get a few extra bits of food for her grandson. Like, all of these problems, and they're just not addressed. It's just that's just the way it is, I guess. And it is political to try and depoliticize those things. It really is. And, and then you have something else that happens in the second half of the movie, which I'll get onto later. But that's just really the first half. It's just all these problems in rural America, and you consider J.D. Vance, who wrote this. It's kind of, it is political, ignoring how all this stuff happened when you're pointing them out over and over again. Basically, what do you think?
Basically, I agree with you. It refuses to look at, and there are so many moments in this film where you just look at it and think, like, knowing that this guy presents himself as kind of a political commentator, that this, J.D. Vance is invested in politics, even though there isn't politics in this film necessarily directly, or I agree with you, there's implicit politics because it refuses to acknowledge it. But you watch it and you think, like, how does he not realize that this is, you look at the fact that his mum is struggling to get healthcare, and you just think, how does that not demonstrate, like, it's kind of funny because the film, you want to be like, oh, the film is all about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and being a success, but then pulling yourself up by your bootstraps doesn't solve a lot of the problems in this film. Like, he's like, that's the kind of hilarious thing about it. You would think, and I realize, like, conservatives probably watch this and like, oh yeah, he's working 3 jobs as it should be. Like, that's the, like, when to get to pay himself through college, like, conservatives here, like, that's the crazy thing about conservatives. When conservatives hear that somebody is working 3 jobs to put themselves through college, their response is good. And not necessarily from like they wouldn't even view it from a callous perspective or an evil perspective. They'd be like, well, it's good that he's doing hard work. That would be their logic. Like, oh, it's good that he's doing some hard work, ignoring the fact that, of course, all of the wealthiest people who conservatives seem to admire and love and think are job creators and don't think should pay tax and all that stuff, all of them, they didn't have to work to put themselves through college. But, this guy did have to, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's good. But even in this film, him working 3 jobs or whatever to put himself through college is not enough. Like, that's one of the tensions of the film. Like, he has to now, even on top of that, achieve another thing, which leads to the logical implication that if he had failed to get one of those extra jobs, even though he was incredibly smart, and even though he was working 3 jobs to put himself through college, he would not have been able to stay in college. Like, think about that for a second. If he would have, you show a conservative this film and say, if he had failed, to actually get those jobs, those internships at the law firm, he would have to have left college despite being incredibly smart, despite everything he achieved, because he wouldn't be able to afford the fees. And you just think, how do you not realize then that having to pay money for an education is a problem and profoundly unfair? And obviously the other example is the healthcare. You know, he's pulled himself up by his bootstraps quite a bloody lot, and yet he still can't afford to take care of his parents. And I think it's funny that you mentioned how, or I think I mentioned it, but you obviously mentioned it as well, that one of the messages of the film is he has to abandon his family in order to succeed. Well, the other thing is he has to abandon his family in order to ignore the gaping contradiction that is his life. Because his life is, because what are his problems that can't be solved by pulling up his bootstraps at the end of it? It's like, well, he can't solve the fact that his mum doesn't have access to healthcare. So I guess he's going to have to just leave his mum, run away. You just imagine like his mum being like, I need free healthcare. And he's like running away with his hands over his ears. Like, no, I can't hear you.
Yeah,
bootstraps.
No. Yeah, but that's the thing. He's in this movie, of course, J.D. Vance wrote this. He portrays his mum as a failure, basically. And so the fact that she is having all these problems, well, that's kind of justified because of what a failure that she was. And yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I was just talking about the fact that he's got all these problems and it's never addressed why this is the case. And again, this guy's a political commentator, like you said. So that's why we're harping on this more than it was just like Ron Howard who decided to make this movie. Now, J.D. Vance knows about politics. He might run for Senate, I saw on his Wikipedia page. Why is it that Middletown, Ohio, has all these problems? And, he's one of those people who pays lip service to that. It's like, oh, yeah, we need more economic help for those regions. But, if you ask him about, for example, the student debt thing, like you said perfectly, it's like, what, should that be the case? Be like, oh, yeah, no, that's not a problem, really. And he may even say, like you suggested, that it's a good thing that somebody has to work 3 jobs because hard work is good in itself. But that's the thing. There are I guess depoliticizing political elements is kind of insidious as well. But what is much more, I guess, insidious is like the second half of the movie, where that kind of ideology of bootstraps and conservatism and rugged individualism is pushed. And kind of what you said before, Michael, like these problems, they aren't problems. The problem is if you don't do anything to help yourself, that's the problem. And in fact, these problems can be used as motivation. And I don't think the movie goes that far, but that's, I guess, conservative ideology. Hey, you've got this obstacle in front of you. I mean, that's not a problem. The problem is you not doing anything about it. And also maybe it's good that this obstacle is in front of you. Because life, of course, is like a fucking... what are those training sessions that the army do?
Obstacle course.
Is that just an obstacle course?
Oh, yeah, I just thought, yeah.
Or they have to climb a ladder or a wall, climb a wall, then do the monkey bars, then crawl under wires. It's like, yeah, that's just life, and that's how it should be, apparently. Let's not, remove those monkey bars or fucking, wires. Why would we ever do that? But anyway, yeah, so the first aspect of this is we're going to go through these elements one by one. When he says that weed is a gateway drug, remember that?
Oh yeah, that was a really funny line.
Yeah, and then he refuses, like we said, to piss for his mother, chides her for messing up her life.
Yeah, you know what, actually, I will say this, when that happened, I first thought, and this would have been the most interesting thing to happen in the film, I thought that his mum was going to get back incredibly angry at him because his urine wasn't clean, because off screen he'd given in to some and smoked some marijuana. Like, I thought that was going to be the kind of the thing, and it would be like, and then there'd be a big argument about you, like, what are you doing, smoking pot? And then he'd be like, well,
that'll make stuff interesting.
Yeah, that would be interesting, and that's what I thought was going to happen.
And that would lower him to his mum
just
level.
Like a goody, yeah,
which can't happen, of course. He needs to portray himself as superior for his mum, because his mum makes bad life choices. He makes good life choices, so he's rewarded for that. And yeah, that's the thing. He chides her, obviously, for messing up her life and not taking responsibility for her actions. And it's just like, he's like a fucking Wall Street Journal commentator already, and he's 11 years old. And saying weed is a gateway drug as well. Oh my god. And then Glenn Close has a conversation with him outside the house, and he says that she messed up by refusing to put her foot down, letting her get away with this. And yeah, I was just watching that scene and thinking, this is like a commercial for like conservative politics, like bootstrap individualism, like putting all the failings of Amy Adams' life on her. Why can't she clean her mess up for once? He says, like, and it's just so annoying, Michael. That's the thing. Like, I don't imagine there isn't anyone. Well, I don't imagine there aren't people who are just deliberately mess up their life, and no matter how much you help them, they mess up. But the fact is that, JD, he called this movie a hillbilly elegy, i.e. this is typically what goes on in a hillbilly community, in these poor rural white communities. So this is almost typical, or close to typical. He's using his own experience as, hey, this is what can happen. And so therefore, what he's doing, because he wrote this book, he's saying, well, these are why the problems exist, because people just, I guess they just mess up their life, and they don't take responsibility, and there you go. So what do you think of that?
No, yeah, I mean, it's like the scene of her being like, of him being like, sorry, if you keep bailing her out, she's gonna keep doing it. If you keep forgiving her, she's gonna keep doing it. You gotta be tough. Like when he's a kid to his grandparents, which is weird, or his grandmother and obviously mother, and it is a really weird line to say, and like so. And
she fails after that as well. Remember?
Yeah.
Exactly. He helps, and she, of course, she still fails, because even if you help someone, unless they help themselves, of course, it has to be failing. Yeah, and again, later on in the movie, Glenn Close says Amy Adams needs to take responsibility for her actions. Again, that word, and this comes up a lot in the second half of the movie, as I said. Then she has this line where she says to JD that in 3 years his friends will be in jail or on food stamps. I mean, and apparently and she says that they're losers. And again, that's their fault, because they're losers. It's not the economic situation they're in. It's just they're losers. And again, like, I don't imagine that some, grandma would say something like that. But the fact is that this guy, he's a political commentator, and he's using, this is, and of course JD does succeed, and those people probably don't succeed. And so therefore, the thing is that, that this is to be taken as gospel of why people who are hillbillies succeed and why others don't. And then remember when JD tries to steal a calculator? Gets found out. And that's the thing, he rightly points out that his mum didn't make it despite being smart. And what does Glenn Close say? Said her mum just quit and stopped trying. Again, this personal responsibility stuff, just hammering you in the face. And, then JD takes some initiative and figures it all out, doesn't he? And I do like, by the way, I guess the calculator thing was kind of the moment of, that made him think more along the lines of, maybe I got to start booking up my ideas and pulling up those bootstraps and all that. But then what really does change him is the Meals on Wheels guy who, hands food to his grandma, and his grandma has to beg for some more food because, she doesn't have a lot. And I look at that and I think that what that was for JD Vance is that was him being shamed. Like, oh my God, we're charity cases, aren't we? Oh my God. Well, this can't happen. Like, he, the concept of him, other people helping people are helping him, that's embarrassing for him. That shouldn't be the way it is. So therefore he has to, buckle down. That is the triggering point in the story that really makes him, go after trying to achieve the American dream. Him being shamed by having some food brought to him. That was, and his grandmother having to ask for help. So what do you think? I'm right on that? That he is shamed?
No, yeah. I do think that. Yeah, basically, he's disgusted at the fact he's poor, and therefore, because he's disgusted at the fact he's poor, he decides to not give up and to succeed and to not be a poor person anymore.
Yeah.
And if poor people understood how gross it was being poor, they would try to not be poor too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it isn't really. That's what it is, really, and especially, like I said in the second bit, it's a tale of personal responsibility. Look at how this person overcame these obstacles. I mean, should these obstacles be there in the first place? I mean, that's the question. And of course, no, there are no real thoughts on that. And like you said, JD Vance and other conservatives would probably be like, yeah, they should actually be there in the first place. Yeah, they should be. I think of, what I've saved this for the end because this was the scene that stood out to me in particular. It's the scene in the movie where he says to his mum, these things where, I can imagine again somebody saying them to their mum, but of course, since this is a movie and that line was specifically written for the scene, and JD Vance is saying it, JD Vance says she took and she took and she was too lazy to stay alive. Just JD Vance literally says those lines to Amy Adams, like just perfectly pinning the faults of Amy Adams' character on her for being, a bad person. I mean, again, these characters, they're used as, it's Hillbilly Elegy. This is, a typical hillbilly household. Why does Amy Adams' character fail? Yeah, it's because, she's, like J.D. Vance literally said from the character's mouth, who plays him, she was too lazy, and she took and took. And that's why, she's now a heroin addict. So, yeah. Anything else to say on that?
No, I think that's basically, I mean, yeah, you've pretty much nailed it, that this film really does, I mean, it's kind of crazy, this film just is straight up judging his mum, and it's kind of, there's not this attitude of, I don't know, yeah, it's like there's such a lack of regard for how obviously his mum basically did a good job, but in the same way that J.D. Vance would have failed, despite all the reasons why he might have been expected to succeed, if a few things had gone wrong for him, because if his grandma hadn't bought him the calculator, what would have he would have failed. Like, there are so many examples you just point to of, well, he would have failed too, and yet the film's like insisting upon judging this Amy Adams because she didn't succeed, and you're like, well, imagine a different scenario where J.D. Vance doesn't get bought the calculator, and therefore he's not able to do well at maths, and then suddenly he's getting judged by his own kids. It's like, well, you didn't, then maybe his son becomes a big success, and it's like, well, my dad didn't try.
We get a couple of scenes.
That's what you get, J.D. Vance.
We get a couple of scenes of sympathy, don't we? For Amy Adams, just a couple, flashing back to her childhood, showing that she had a rough childhood or whatever. But nothing about, well, how did she, what barriers did she face? She was the second smartest in her school of 400 people. So why wasn't she a success? Well, the movie never delves into that. And again, you just kind of, all the impression you're left with Amy Adams, again, that stand-in for another rural, poor white hillbilly. All the other ones as well, single mothers, well, they're just lazy, basically. And that's the insidious nature of the movie. And it is insidious because it reinforces this idea, which is incredibly destructive, that, it's it's up to you, really. And if you don't succeed in life, then you're a bad person. And, if you didn't earn it, the fact that you didn't earn it means you shouldn't have earned it. And, just ridiculous. And I guess... Well, shall we get into a bit more into J.D. Vance, Michael?
Yes, I want to hear about J.D. Vance.
So, I mean, we've said, he's a conservative, he's a political commentator, but he's also, as you can see in his Wikipedia page, he's a venture capitalist. And that's what I think when he looks back on this movie, like his journey of him succeeding. It's like, yes, I get to shit on these guys now. Like, I got out because I'm so smart. It's that social Darwinism thing. I got out because I succeeded because I worked hard for it. And he got out also because of his conservative values. That's the great thing about it. He is, to use another Game of Thrones reference, Michael, he's the prince who was promised, isn't he?
Yes, we do like that.
Yes, he succeeded because of conservative values, and he knows it. And therefore, there's nothing wrong with our economic system, is there? There's nothing wrong with it. And you consider that Vance is a visiting fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, researching American society and culture. This movie just reaffirms that message. And, of course, the AIE is very right-wing. I imagine does not believe that student debt should be cancelled. I imagine does not believe that the minimum wage should be raised. And, it's another one of these institutions that he works for. And I guess, conservatives just build these institutions around justifying why poor people not being given money is good and right. And that's another one. And that's what's dangerous about a guy like J.D. Vance in terms of politics, because he can say, hey, look, I made it, then anyone else can. And I think hopefully people aren't dumb enough to fall for that. But, generally that's what conservatives in the past especially, not really that now, that it's the economics have been kind of diluted out of conservative messaging. But back in the day, that's what conservatives really loved to do. They used to pick someone in our country, John Major, for instance, Prime Minister from 90 to 97. It was like, he was from Brixton, I think, a place in London, and you pick this one person out of a poor area and you make them Prime Minister. Oh, you say, look at that. Look, people can succeed from poor backgrounds. The economic system isn't at fault because I succeeded, and that's what this movie and this guy's life seemingly is trying to, he's trying to promote that ideology. And it's that's why somebody like him is, if he gets a foothold and people start listening to him, It's bad, and I think that's why people liked that after 2016. This is when the book came out in 2016, and it was met with quite well received reviews in liberal places in Washington and New York and all that. And the reason why is because it doesn't really focus on our economic system, or America's economic system. Of course, in the UK, we have a similar thing going on with neoliberalism, but it doesn't focus on that. It focuses, on individualism, and it's like maybe the problem. He shifts the conversation away. He ignores even though, hey, look at how awful the healthcare system. He shifts the conversation away from the healthcare system, and we have long conversation about Amy Adams and the fact that she's a heroin addict and what are you doing to make yourself or take some responsibility, yada yada, all that stuff. So but thankfully this movie isn't received that well. So that's good news. But JD Vance. He might run for Senate one day, Michael. That's what it says on his Wikipedia page.
Great. I look forward to that.
So, maybe we'll see him more in the future. And like I said, it's a very dangerous thing. A very, very dangerous thing because, I think media institutions are very happy to glom onto that narrative that he's pushing. And, so anything else to say?
I could see him being one of those people who is right-wing, but he's going to be kind of the anti-Trump. So who knows? Maybe the good news is Trumpism will keep this guy out, because I don't really see this. The one impression I got from this film is it isn't the kind of guy who's going to go full Trump and be like, "Oh, we gotta," being really angry about it. He's probably more going to be the kind of guy who's like, we need to get back to the he's almost he's going to be talking about things like American values, traditional American values, and the how great and wonderful America is, but from the perspective of he's not going to be as angry as Trump. So I guess the question will be, I could see him emerging as a moderate Republican figure who's going to want to, basically,
He's an economic nationalist. That is definitely, I don't know what it really means, economic nationalist, but that's what he'd say.
I guess just protectionism.
Yeah, he's in that Steve Bannon model. This is one of his tweets that he tweeted on the 2nd of November. As a parent of young children and a nationalist who worries about America's low fertility, I can say with confidence that daylight savings time reduces fertility by at least 10%. Obviously it's going to be a joke, but he's not joking about being a nationalist, and he's probably not joking about America's low fertility either. And
okay. I thought, I don't know, the impression I got from this film is that this guy was trying to present himself as a good guy because he was genuinely he
that's
thought
the
had
movie
kind of good,
it neuters the book, it neuters himself, it does, but it's still there. That underbelly is still there, but it's not as overt as it is in the book, and it certainly isn't overt as himself in real life and all the things he's done. I watched an interview actually before this, just to see how he was, how he talked, how he was in real life, and he was on Tucker Carlson's show, and he was basically he does the same thing that Tucker Carlson does, which is essentially complain about how poor people and his Appalachian communities, how they're being left behind, but doesn't really want to do anything about it. It's just all window dressing, as it were. And he literally said that Medicare for all. He actually sounded out Medicare for all and said Medicare for all would actually give more money to the pharmaceutical companies and wouldn't actually help those people. And what was very interesting is that Tucker Carlson said, that's a very interesting point. I haven't heard of it. We'll get onto that sometime later because the conversation wasn't on that. But Tucker Carlson clearly, like J.D. Vance, was like, that's an idea that could work to try and scupper Medicare for all, because it's a popular policy. It works. But we don't want that because, we're actually right-wing capitalists. So let's instead make up some lies about it. Yeah, it's just all, aesthetic talk, and they don't actually care about it. Which is why, he's different to Trump, J.D. Vance. But it's the same kind of thing, really, about, he's still got those conservative values, and also he's concerned about fertility rates, and he's a nationalist. And so, I don't really think he's that. You think he's moderate, and of course you didn't know about the quote or the tweet before you said that.
I
but
didn't know.
That's why it's just everything about him. Yeah, and also, the thing is, there's a guy, I just mentioned him. There's a guy who's actually in front of him in that kind of Republican political circle, which is Tucker Carlson. I mean, if Tucker Carlson wants to run for president, then he can. He can do it. And Tucker Carlson he's very similar. Very similar to J.D. Vance from what I've seen. All the things that Tucker Carlson has been saying these past 4 years while Trump has been president, similar to what Vance has been kind of pointing out. So so there's doesn't look good for the future, basically, Michael. If one of these two gets, I mean, Trump's bad and all, but, what's worse than an incompetent fascist, Michael?
A competent fascist.
Yeah, you got it. And
Yes.
I don't imagine anyone will ever be as incompetent as Trump.
No, yes, exactly. We really got lucky. We really lucked out with Trump, didn't we?
Nah, I mean,
He
you
was
did.
so terrible.
You did, because I would rather have Donald Trump as president than J.D. Vance.
Yes.
I would rather have that. I'd rather have Donald Trump as... I don't know if Tucker Carlson actually... I don't know, because he's changed quite a lot throughout his television career. But yeah, I'd probably rather have Trump in than Carlson, because Trump, we are lucky he was that incompetent. Because that's the thing. If he was just less incompetent, he probably wouldn't be as hated, and he'd do a better job of implementing his, or his supposed worldview. But I think we can both agree that Trump doesn't have an ideology, right? He just
definitely.
I mean, it's just like kind of, Republican,
whatever serves him.
Yeah, by the guy at the end of the bar shouting inane things about, Colin Kaepernick. That's the ideology, if there even is one. But yeah, so yeah, that's the thing. I guess that's JD Vance. So yeah, there you go. And once again, liberal Hollywood. We love liberal Hollywood, don't we? Oh actually, that's what I was going to end on. Ben Shapiro.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He so you need to be on Twitter, Michael, to see these things. You need, because this is what it's all about. Where's that tweet? Okay, so this is what Ben Shapiro said. I've seen. Do you want to? Should I do a Ben Shapiro accent?
I do think it would be good actually.
I've seen Hillbilly, Elegy. Amy Adams and Glenn Close are both terrific. The movie is a well-told family drama. The reason the critics are crapping all over is simple. The book was treated as humanizing Trump supporters and is now a bad book. So the movie is also bad. And he put a trademark next to bad.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm speaking too quickly for this to be,
Yeah.
But basically,
you're going a bit too fast. But remember, you got to talk quite fast because that's how we know that you're making a good point.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's why we speed up the audio. Yeah, but no, he said it's fascinating, and it personalized and commented on cultural pathologies that lead to long-term poverty in rural white communities. That's the key thing. These cultural pathologies then lead to poverty in white communities, and that's what this movie is pushing. And just fucking as we have gone through, disingenuous and bullshit and dangerous and insidious and all those lovely words. So yeah, that's it really. Do you have anything? I'll conclude now, Michael. Yeah, I've talked for so long. Yeah.
All right, yeah, let's conclude. So this film is, it's so strange because on the one hand, it is very boring. Like it's not interesting in any way. There's very little there. I think the annoying thing is in a way that because the politics is kind of almost behind the curtain in a weird way, it makes the film more boring because it's not like the politics isn't up front. Like if the politics was up front, this would be a way more entertaining film. If, the politics was like really obvious center stage, I'd be like, yeah, I love this film. It's brilliant. It's fantastic. But instead, the politics is kind of in the subtext. And it's there because you know who J.D. Vance is. But, you kind of feel like the film's not even being upfront about it, which makes it more annoying. And then on top of that, less interesting because it's like, what is there even in the film? The politics is, like I say, not that, not obvious enough to actually be something you can get any kind of meaning from. And then the actual events of the film are just so boring because it's just like there's no logic to it. There's nothing, no point where I was invested in anything happening at any point because it just wasn't a well structured narrative, and it wasn't a particularly interesting series of events, and the character it was all happening to wasn't a particularly engaging character. So with all that said, unfortunately I think I'm probably not going to give this a 1. Just because I don't like, it always comes down to, some people might say, well, a boring film is the worst thing it can be. I do think like a film that is actively really terrible is worse. But actually, no, I'm going to give it a 1 because I just realized there are some other films on here which I do think are better than this film. I'm going to say that this film is better. No. Okay, wait. No, okay. I think I know. I'm going to say this film is worse than Crash, which I also gave a 1. So, yeah, I'm going to say this film's worse than Crash, but better than Amy Schumer's I Feel Pretty. So, yeah, I'll give it a 1. It's deserved it. An earned 1.
Yeah, I'm also going to give it a 1. I mean, it's a boring movie. The politics is kind of hidden, but if you look close enough, you can find it. The first half, I think, is bad politically because, it shows these problems and ignores them in a way that says, "Hey, that's the way it is," which is a deliberate attempt to depoliticize these issues, so people think, "Oh, there's nothing that can be done. Student debt is what it is, and you just got to work hard." I guess we can't remove those obstacles. And the second half is more overt, with so much talk about personal responsibility, and veers close to saying, "Hey, these obstacles, they're good, and if you don't go over them, you're a bad person." And there's no talk about systemic failings really. And yeah, I like that Ben Shapiro line again. Pathologies. That's why heroin addiction has risen so much. It's not neoliberalism. It's rural white pathologies. Great stuff. But yeah, so that's it. And of course, J.D. Vance, because he came from this and he succeeded, he can say, yeah, it is because I didn't have those pathologies, and I look at what I did. I turned out pretty good. I'm a successful lawyer. I went to the American Enterprise. I'm a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. So yeah, that's why this movie is really, really shit. Not just because of the messages, but it's because who wrote it, and that matters. Or created the book in the first place. Of course, he didn't actually write the screenplay. So yeah, I'm going to get a 1 as well, Michael. 1 out of 10. What are we doing next week?
Next week, we are doing a real classic, Luke. One for the ages, The Blue Lagoon.
The Blue Lagoon. Have you seen that yet?
Yes, I have. I've seen it now. I decided to watch it as a double feature with a Hillbilly Elegy.
Oh, great. So yeah, we'll be talking about that next week. So yeah, thank you for listening. We've been selecting and reflecting on Hillbilly Elegy. Yeah, really this may be our most political podcast yet. On Select and Reflect. Yeah. Yeah. So join us next week for Blue Lagoon. Who have you been, Michael?
I've been Michael.
I've been Luke. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.